You're welcome back. This is NewsFile, it's the most authoritative news analysis platform. I'm your host, Samson Ladi Anyanini, and I do not have a take for you this morning. And that should explain a bit of why my introduction was a bit lengthy. Now, as indicated to you already, we are unpacking the OSP report, the Agyapa deal. Did it fail the corruption tests? And the OSP declares Mahama is government official one in the Airbus scandal. So what? And if we have time, contract for sale. Is it time to activate the unexplained wealth law? The Constitution provides that if you have wealth that you cannot explain the source by which you got it, and you're a public office holder who has submitted a declaration of your assets, then the state can confiscate those assets. It includes money in your bank account. Is it time to activate that? As people have said, that what has been found by Shraj in the Manasseh Azure contracts for sale report that led to the Shraj work is only a tip of the iceberg, and that there are many such, public office holders, particularly politicians, who similar things can be found about them. They cannot account for the wealth that they have made within the period they got into power, or even after they have left power. So, if we have time, we'll look at that as well. My guest this morning, on my right, is Bright Simmons, who is Honorary Executive, Imani Africa. Bright, thank you very much for making time to join us.
Thank you.
And belated happy birthday to you. Yesterday was your birthday, and I discovered that on social media. There's a lot of buzz. Right. Okay. Also here in the studio is Dr. Yao Graham, Coordinator, Third World Network Africa. Thank you for making the time to join us, Doc.
Thank you. Good morning.
Right. Thank you. Now, on the Zoom, we shall have Nana Akomia, who is member, MPP Communications Team, and MD State Transport Company Limited. Also, Eduji Godwin Tamaklo, Kujo Tamaklo, is lawyer and member, NDC National Communication and Legal Team. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us via Zoom.
Thank you, Samson.
Thank you, Samson.
Great. Great. I think your Zoom connections are good.
Thank you to the other distinguished partners.
Okay. So immediately, I think what I have to say is that, Eduji, you may have to work on your Zoom connection because it doesn't come out as the best. So let's work on that before we put you on, and then we don't have any, interruptions. Thank you. Now, yes, today is how many days? About 4 days after the US went to the polls. Mm-hmm. Right. And they still can't say who is a winner. Briefly, you guys follow international news and things. Can we have your brief comments about what is going on? Trump is is not thinking about conceding, despite the fact that, the key states that are involved now, Joe Biden clearly is in the lead.
Well, it's quite instructive how much the U.S. electoral process depends on trust and conventional techniques that date back to the 19th century. We've gone far ahead of that, but that presupposes also that the U.S. is living on past glory. The notion that you can have mail-in ballots where people will, request for a ballot is sent to your post, you fill it in and you post it, and so long as the date is before a particular threshold, then it has to be counted, even if it comes 10 days after the election. Some states allow the mail-in ballots to arrive 22 days after the close of polls, of the in-person polls. And in a close election, it's quite difficult. And I think any country with such a system will have faced significant challenges. What is quite interesting, though, is the fact that many people had supposed there was sufficient repudiation of the Trump philosophy that this would be a walk in the park for the Democratic Party, and it hasn't been.
Right.
It's quite clear the country is deeply divided, a highly polarized society. What is even more fascinating is the votes of Donald Trump has actually been increasing among minorities. And obviously, this thing that there is a monolithic voting bloc is problematic because there are Latinos that are heavily Christian, some of them are Catholic, and it's possible that they will overlook some of the social welfare issues that the Democratic Party has anchored their flag on and vote on religious principles. So I think it's really exciting lessons for all of us.
Yeah, but what do you think? Should he be preparing his concession speech rather than what he's trying to pull up legal, suits here and there? And already some of them have been thrown out because he doesn't have any evidence to back the claims of, rigging and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, the issue is whether or not some kind of auditing of the mail-in ballots can prove very specific things like signatures not being on the ballot. Some of the ballots have been mailed after the due date. So there is some hope that you can prolong it for a while. But I think there is already the sense that he's lost the election within the country.
Right.
There is also the overseas ballots. And some of those overseas ballots, particularly the military ballots, tend to be more pro-Republican in most years. And so maybe he has his hope on some of the military ballots that will be coming from overseas. The U.S. has hundreds of thousands of soldiers posted overseas.
Yes, but that will constitute much of popular vote. You're talking about electoral college. And as far as we are concerned, as you can see, in Pennsylvania, 20 electoral
some ballots are state-based. So some overseas ballots are state-based.
Okay.
So in some instances, like I think in Georgia, there was a sense that significant overseas ballots from military base overseas might tilt the vote. But it's quite clear that the mood in the country is a post-Trump era mood.
All right. Okay. Yes, Dr. Graham.
Well, I think Bright has made some very important points that I agree with. The polarization. I mean, the fact that there's some of the things that Trump has raised are important. I mean, particularly, the way American capitalism has evolved has left a lot of the inequalities in America are extreme. Never mind that Trump himself is a beneficiary of the system of inequalities, the economic policies. But he's been able to exploit the consequences of what he has benefited from in the kind of populist way.
Yeah.
So there's a deep problem.
You got a lot of rural votes.
Yeah, there are deep problems about unemployment, the industrialization, social insecurity and so on, which it's important. And also, I think that's very key in how this thing is playing out. And I think also the split highlights the fact that some of the measures that the Democrats would have to implement will probably be much more radical than a substantial section of the party is interested in.
And they don't have the congressional votes.
Yeah, so it's going to be a bit of a gridlock, when it comes to power. But as for the process side, I think one of the things which I take from that for ourselves, which we ought to pay attention to, is the great effort at transparency that has gone on.
Okay.
The great effort at transparency. They have webcams in the counting rooms, and all kinds of things which allow, people to have, and that clearly is partly a response to the recognition, of the challenges posed by this particular election, and also, the different mechanisms that they've had over time, and I think Trump, like any candidate in an election, has the right to use whatever legal instruments he can use. But there's also a thing about time wasting and vexatious litigation, of which there's part. So there's the right to do something, there's a vexatious use of process, an abuse of process, and then on a separate level, the incredible nonsense of his life.
As has been said.
He wants to go down with the ship.
If it's a vexatious litigation, it's purely baseless. It's not connected to any law that's been breached or violated or any specific good facts to form a foundation. Then it's, anything but a tweet that comes with legal fees because for this one you go and pay before you file it. Now, any quick commentary about the jovial commentary around suggestions that, is this really America? And America is scared that because of elections, it could turn into something else. And there are some, who are joking and say, Nigeria should be sending observers or should be issuing a travel ban on the US if things don't go well. ECOWAS and the AU, should be making comments.
I was just going to make a very quick point that one of the most renowned finance professors in the US, I wasn't aware of this, but actually the empirical evidence shows that when you have a gridlock within the political branches, so you have, let's say, an executive from one party and the Congress controlled by another, the markets actually perform better. So it appears as if the markets reward America when politicians don't act, which is kind of interesting. But I'm sure the point about financial capitalism and its limits, that doc has made it interesting.
So the talk is that Africa, we beat ourselves too hard, We make small mistakes and the whole world comes at us that we are undemocratic and so on and so forth. But this is America, Dr. Graham.
But you know what? What is good for us.
He's been practicing democracy for how many years?
I'm sorry. I'm not interested in a comparative. There are lessons there. It's more lessons than feeling good.
Okay.
But look, there are profound problems with our politics. I mean, even what we're coming to discuss here, there's a lot of that in America. There's been conflict of interest, abuse of office, and also just manipulating of the political process.
They all have it in different... take it as seriously as they do.
Yeah.
All right.
So they do take it seriously.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. So, your point that they should not feel superior and be lecturing everybody is the most important point. But we should have standards for ourselves that we enforce, that we keep trying to refine and make more and more credible.
Right.
Whatever the Americans are doing is their business.
Nana Komia, what's your brief take on the American elections? And you and Eduji, you have some permutations that you would like to make politically, even though that may look more like some mysticism.
Well, thank you, Samson. Let me say good morning to my former boss, Dr. Graham, whom I haven't seen in quite a while, and also wish Bright Simmons a belated happy birthday. Congratulations, Bright. And also my young friend, Etuti, and our listeners, a good Saturday morning. Yes, the American elections have been interesting. I believe that what stands out in this election is the behavior of President Trump. I suspect that when the history comes to be written, this election is going to stand out, not for the closeness of the elections. There have been very close elections. You remember the 2000 elections where it had to be determined by the vote of Florida. But so there have been close elections, but the behavior of President Trump in these elections is quite unique. And I don't think you would find any sitting president coming close to the behavior that has been exhibited. His behavior clearly suggests somebody who that it must go his way or no way at all.
Right.
And funny enough, Samson, he hasn't hidden this attitude of himself. You remember when he had a TV program, and for 2 years or 3 years, the TV program hadn't won an award. He said that the awards people were rigged against him, against his television program, because his television production had not won an award. Even during the Republican primaries 4 years ago, which he won, in some states of the primaries where he lost, he said that the Republican political machinery was rigged against him. Even though he won he eventually won, he had complained of the system being rigged against him because at some point he was losing. You remember he's been asked on quite a few occasions if he would accept the results.
Right.
He stated categorically that he would accept the results only when he wins, and that if he doesn't win, he's not going to accept the results. So you can see this attitude being the most significant development in this election, and that is what is exactly playing out. He had declared himself to be the winner or the leader the leading candidate.
But the outcome,
Shortly after the polls,
the outcome,
and then
yeah, the
now
outcome.
he says that the thing is being rigged against him.
Yeah, the outcome is surprising to many people. Just like, you know, he crushed the punditocracy the last time, the punditocracy the last time. No pundit is able to get it correctly when it comes to Donald Trump featuring in the elections. Now, the Al Jazeera, for example, has been trying to count the number of times that President Trump has told a lie. I mean, bare-faced lie. And they've counted over 22,000 occasions, 22,000 occasions when he has told a lie. Why do you think, irrespective of all of the odds so much against him, he's still, you know, giving Biden a good run for his money?
I think that there's a simple answer in my view. The simple answer is that there's a difference between the message and the messenger. So when you look at Trump, the man, the person, the personality, you can come up with all these shortcomings, lying, being vindictive, disrespectful, all of that. But his message, the message also resonates with a lot of Americans. These themes about making other people in the world pay their own way, not letting America be in a nanny state that is going to take care of everybody, whether it's NATO, whether it's whatever, NAFTA, the North American trade deal with Mexico and Canada, whether it's dealing with China in a way that the Americans, the average American expect, and so on. Whether it's bringing jobs from abroad, and because of the things that have to be done to lower tariffs and incentives for American companies that go abroad so they can bring their jobs back to America. Those things resonate with the average American.
All right.
So that the personality of Trump is also a problem.
Okay, thank you.
So for me, if Biden or the Democratic Party, if they had also gone on those messages, I believe it would have been a much more.
Thank you. Now, Eduji, can we hear from you also briefly? Do you really believe in that? It's not science, but it sounds a coincidence. They say every time that the Democrats are in power, the NDC is in power. Is that it? So you are excited about the outcome?
Samson, good morning, and good morning to my senior brother, Nana Komia, Dr. Yal Graham. I used to worry him a lot when I was at the Department of Economics. I was doing something on the Economic Partnership Agreement, so I was always worrying his outfits. And our viewers and listeners. Let me use the words of my senior brother, Nana Komia, as captured in the Chronicle newspaper, November 2016, when he made the point that the victory of Trump was a signal that there was change coming. I think that consistent with that statement by Nana Komia, I would want to say that with Biden's victory, clearly there's change coming. And what becomes even more clearer is when you begin to look at the Trump governance, the self-dealings, the nepotism, the self-dealing, how his governance became akin to the notion of conflict of interest. Clearly, you can see a similarity with what is happening today. And I am even more excited that one of the issues that we're going to discuss will be the Agyapa deal. And that clearly is what we have been saying. And so, like you said earlier, there's a certain, similarity, 1992, 96, 2000, 2004, 2008, 2012, 2016, and now. So we are very confident that, again, looking at the character of the president that we have today, it is very clear that we have seen this. And you see, Samson,
Interesting.
let nobody take this thing away from us, to the extent that President Akufo-Addo, until 2016 when he won, he's never publicly conceded an election. His first time coming was 2008. You recall the misadventure by my learned senior, Nana Komia, relative to the ex-party application to injunct Afarijan. The time events consistent with Trump behaviors. So I am very confident, like my senior Nana Komia said, the wind of change is coming.
This was supposed to be to start on a lighter note, but but I can tell that, you know.
So clearly, but obviously this is also on a lighter note.
Clearly not.
But like I pointed out, we are very confident.
Okay.
We are very confident of victory.
Okay.
We are very confident of victory.
All right. Thank you. Okay.
Samson.
Yes, I knew you will insist that you ought to be giving an opportunity.
I don't remember.
Do just a minute.
The wind of change is coming in Ghana. In Ghana, the wind of change has already happened in 2016, and we're enjoying that wind of change. And my friend says that, well, there's going to be a correspondent result. I'm assuming that Biden is finally declared a winner. Well, if you're going to look at these happenings and base your hopes on it, I would like my brother Edudi to consider some other interesting statistic. What I have found is that in Ghana's election, every incumbent president who wins the elections has the #1 position. That President Rawlings in 1996, when as incumbent president was standing for election, had a #1 position. J.A. Kufuor in 2004, as incumbent president standing for re-election, had a #1 position. It was only President Mahama, as incumbent president, who didn't have the #1, and he lost. Akufo-Addo, as incumbent president, has the #1 position. I'd like Edudi to go and think about that.
All right. So on that, on that fetish note, can we stop it there and then get to the more serious business for the morning? And as always, this program is brought to you by the kind sponsorship of Bank of Africa, strong as a group and close as a partner, MTN everywhere you go, Ashesi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa, Duraplas, where Duraplas goes, water flows, Star Assurance, your solid partner, Rehoboth Properties, Heaven Mosquito Spray and Coil, pleasant on humans, tough nightmare on insects, and Napa Foods, it's tasty. So this is how I'm going to start. I'm going to have our guests give their preliminary overview of the documents that they have read. And then we will take a break, return to look at specifics of the OSP's corruption assessment report of the Agyapa mineral royalties deal. So I'll begin with Bright Simmons. If you look at the entire document, and also if you juxtapose it with, I suppose you have the opportunity of reading the finance minister's memo that tries to react to specific portions of it, what will be, your summary or your executive summary? Yeah.
So I am of the view that the special prosecutor did a fairly thorough job given the time that he had and the resources that were available to him. It was quite clear that there was some stonewalling, information not being provided on time to enable his analysis, and therefore he had written the report in 2 parts. One part with the information that was available from the beginning, and then subsequently added some additional information towards the end. So you can see that towards the end, it was on less sure grounds because the information was just not being provided. And one fascinating example of that was when he made the point that, you know, they go to the PPA, the Public Procurement Authority, for permission to ask consultants to submit, to respond to an RFP. And they then changed the terms that they had agreed with the PPA to require a local partner. And when the responses came through, they decided that Imara had won with Databank. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, they refused to give to the special prosecutor the response of the second entity that submitted. So they wrote to 8 companies, and then they got 2 responses back. And of those 2 responses, the one that won, the Imara Databank Consortium, that document was provided to the special prosecutor. And he said, okay, but what about the losing bid, Morgan Stanley Boulders? Mm-hmm. And they said, we won't give that to you. So essentially, we're not going to help you to evaluate whether or not the Imara Databank victory was sound. You also have to remember that this particular practice of refusing to provide information was so consistent that it's quite evident from the OSP's language that he was infuriated by the end of it. And I think a lot of the colorful language he then subsequently used was driven by this lack of respect for his office. So that would be a very important aspect of the analysis for us going forward.
All right.
The only concern that I have with the OSP is that I think he should have reached out to civil society, because we've been spending months working on this, and he had just a few weeks. And if he had relied on civil society, I think some of the omissions in the report, which actually frightens me more. So the things that he wrote, yes, he uses some colorful language like lack of ethicalness, greedy self-interest, and people have latched onto that, understandably. But there are more grievous problems that he could not uncover given the period of time. What people don't realize is that when a preliminary report turns out such damning findings, it's actually very bad, because usually a preliminary report is to look for only the prima facie bad things about something. So if in a short period of time I just look at the documents, like even with this minimum exposure, I find that the whole transaction is riddled with bad things, so to speak, then any detailed investigations is likely to uncover more problems. And that is what we find, those of us that have been spending a longer time on these documents, that the OSP in some respects actually omits a number of very, very grievous problems with the report.
Oh, really? Okay, Dr. Graham.
Well, I mean, to pick up where Bright landed, I mean, the effect, therefore, one, is that even without the attention that Bright is talking about, in detail to some of the issues that have been raised, in kind of more kind of technical analysis of some aspect about the economics and of the report and so on, of the Agyapa deal. I mean, I think the report adds to the body of arguments about why this Agyapa deal is a no in terms of the country's interest. I mean, all the issues about conflict of interest, stonewalling, and so on, and I think it also underlines the important issue, really, of a rigorous public policy around conflict of interest, because the PPA case, it's an even more extreme example. You yourself in your intro, you pointed to that, and of course the role of Parliament, which some of us have been complaining about, that has become derisory in terms of its representation of people's interest in protecting, the public interest. I think it's another issue. So the arguments made by people about why the Agyapa deal is not good for the country have been reinforced by the additional things, because there's some details about process which were not available. Now, I think that those details about the process are important, not simply for the Agyapa deal, but what it tells us about the relationship between political office holders and our public services, the ways in which they become suborned completely to the interest.
The OSP has a lot of suspicion, and he begins his report on the premise, a lot of suspicion. Do you think that in seeking to present a professional report on an assessment, risk assessment, he ought to be dabbling in so much of suspicion from beginning to the end?
Well, I mean, that's your evaluation of it. I mean, I didn't get the sense that I was dabbling in evaluation. The important thing is that even if you read it, that I was dabbling in suspicion, at the end of the report, does it offer enough evidence for us as Ghanaian citizens to draw a conclusion which would stand one way or the other? This is important because, you see, he didn't say it was kind of an investigation. And the president refers to that in terms of how he responds to the report. Now, the president does not challenge the report. He doesn't deny it. And the way he proceeded points to the fact that overall, he thinks there's some merit in the report.
Okay.
Then he asked his finance minister to respond to the thing. Now, there are many things in the report that the finance minister did not respond to.
Right.
Some of the responses that he made can be contested. So basically, I mean, my view is that this adds an important element to the argument about why the Agyapa deal is not a good deal for, and also adds to our some of the issues we should be concerned about the quality of governance in this country.
So therefore, there may be justification for some of the suspicions that the OSP raises. Let's get your preliminary views as well, and then we take a break, return to look at the very details. So if you have not read the report, you cannot be part of this discussion. I cannot promise you that, because we will deal with the report and not with some populist, talk, because it's a political platform or something, so we should talk. Right. So, yes, Eduji, what's your overall, view of the report in summary?
Yes, let me start, first of all, that if we are to take on the face value the 64-page report of Martin Amidu and the subsequent conduct of the president. One, the president's decision to refer the approved deal back to Parliament, majority MPs. Now, the president's decision just to refer the deal back to Parliament for whatever it is, for me, casts the president in the mode of a person who does not consistently take responsibility. And so his conduct looks like more of a Pontius Pilate than demonstrating leadership. Because remember, in all of this, he gave executive approval for this deal. And so if there's a problem with it, he failed. But to create the impression that let it go back to sender more or less for it to be reconsidered is quite regrettable. But I need to also say that I'm a bit disappointed in the special prosecutor. If you look at the law establishing the office, sections 3, and with your kind permission, I read, functions of the office, section 3.1. It said to achieve the object, the office shall A, investigate and prosecute cases of alleged or, very important, suspected corruption, Public Procurement Act.
All right, Eduji, your feed is frozen. Let's hope you are able to get it up, so that we can continue with you. But my question to all of you that we are starting with is to get your general overview of the report. The report. So let's speak to the report rather than speak to other things. Yes, Anakomia, let's hear you.
Thank you, Samson. You took the words out of my mouth when you had talked about suspicions. What the Martin Amidu's office has done is done an audit and not an investigation. And as a result of that audit, has made some observations which basically are suspicions. I would not say the suspicions are founded or not founded. They remain important suspicions. Many of the suspicions that he had put on paper have also been echoed by some civil society organizations. I'm sure Dr. Graham and Bright alluded to them, but they still remain suspicions. The field of inquiry, further inquiry, is still open. And so for me, my happiness is that the door is not closed. The ends of transparency and accountability are still being sought by especially the government, the president himself, and the finance minister are still open to serve the ends of transparency and accountability. It's unfortunate that my brother in the NDC thinks that the president has not shown leadership. I think many people would agree that the president has shown exceptional leadership in this matter, exceptional responsibility. He hasn't issued any defense or acceptance at all. He says that in view of the issues, whether suspicions or not raised by the office of the special prosecutor, he wants the whole transaction to be reviewed and he's asked the finance minister to go back to Parliament. The modalities of that, I'm sure, to be worked out. I'm sure there's now going to be, in fact, the finance minister has already started consultations with civil society organizations, and there's quite a few reports on those interactions. It will be deepened. I'm sure even the office of the OSP would be engaged in these further consultations. And if there's general mutual agreement about genuine difficulties, then those difficulties will constitute some of the material that will be sent to Parliament. Because as we speak, what we have has already been agreed and assented by the President. So if we're going back, then you're going back to Parliament with a new or different transaction. And I'm sure before the Finance Minister will go to Parliament, all these engagements will be deepened. I don't know if this process can be finished before the end of this year. After the elections on the 7th of December, assuming the remote possibility that the NDC wins, they will not be interested in the current finance minister leading a process to finalize this deal, a second review by Parliament. They will not be interested. So, and if what the most probable outcome, which the NPP would win, this process will go on to next year. So there will be time for review, and there will be time for the deep consultations that have to be made, or a continuation of the consultations that have already started.
All right.
So the president said, look, in light of the report, the observations by an important office like the Office of the Special Prosecutor, in the ends of transparency and accountability, Finance Minister, please engage everybody, look at the whole thing again, and
thank you, Nana. But if I may remind you, we are going to interrogate the reports. What the president has said about it, we may deal with it later, but we are going to interrogate the report. And as you say, there are suspicions in there. You will not say whether or not the suspicions are founded or not, but you can say that they are important suspicions. So we leave it there until we return.
Just a little response to my friend Eduji.
No response. There's no point for a response. Now, Eduji, you were making the point you couldn't conclude your preliminary asset overview of the report. Okay, we understand your problem is still there, so we'll fix that and then get back. We'll take our first break here. We'll return shortly, and I will engage my guests in the studio a lot more to interrogate the report. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is NewsFile, your most authoritative news analysis platform. My guest, Bryce Simmons, Honorary Executive, Imani Africa, Dr. Yao Graham, Coordinator, Third World Network, Nana Komia, Member, MPP Communications Team, and Eduji Tamaklo, also of the Communications Team of the NDC. And so, Eduji, we want you to conclude on your statement before we launch into the deep. Yes, so we have raised Eduji on phone rather to avoid the problems that we have. Yes, Eduji, let's hear you.
Something. So the point I was making. Hello.
Yes, I can hear you, but there's this echo that I don't understand. But go ahead, talk and let's see.
Okay, sorry for the technical issues. The point I was making is that the OSP Act.
Okay, the set by you, whichever it is, can you just kill the volume on it?
No, there is nothing. Is it better?
Okay, try. Let's see. Try.
Is it better?
Yes, Zoom better now.
Okay.
Let's go.
Thank you. So the point I was making is that if you look at the OSP Act itself, it's an act that is couched on the basis of suspicion, not only an allegation, but suspicion. And so the whole idea that the report is so much tilted on suspicion, and in the words of the special prosecutor himself, he says he smells. I think that is the way the act itself is couched that allows suspicion to become the basis for some of these conclusions. But like it is, even in normal criminal justice system, the facts presented for the purposes of prosecution nonetheless do not constitute evidence. It is when witnesses are called that on the basis of an assessment, you can say a prima facie. So he does not need, on the basis of this report, to demonstrate prima facie determination of wrongdoing or anything. And that, for me, is where my disappointment comes in. Because having, on your own report, made findings, for instance, relative to bid rigging, among other things, and infractions of the Public Procurement Act, I think that he has no basis to say he's referring the work to the president. What he needs to do is to begin the prosecution process without more. And for me, that's where my disappointment comes in. So it's more like a Pyrrhic victory, more or less.
Is there a specific provision of the OSP Act you refer to say that the act itself is, couched on, as in your own words, suspicion, and a basis to say if you are doing a risk assessment,
suspicion, yes,
you don't give a report back on the risk assessment?
Yes, my submission is founded and I'm fortified by reason of Section 3 of the OSP Act, which says that to achieve the object, the office shall investigate and prosecute cases of alleged or suspected corruption or corruption-related offenses under the Public Procurement Act, Act 663. Suspicion, suspected. And so, if in your own work, you have found evidence or whatever of what you call bid rigging, why send a report to the president? And again, you will see from the conduct of the president, upon receipts, he basically acted on just pilot, take it to Parliament for reconsideration. Why do you have an act that empowers you to do something, you don't do it, and then you send it to someone who clearly has demonstrated that he has no role to play? And so he says, take it back to Parliament. When Parliament approves of a transaction,
the OSP,
and you and I don't.
The OSP is supposed to investigate suspected acts, as you rightly say, but it is doing a different job at this stage. At this stage, it is not doing an investigation. It's doing a risk assessment. No, the report. No, Eduji, hold on. Let's not start this early. The report is a risk assessment. It's not an investigation. So let's not even start from that premise.
When you say, don't use semantics, with the greatest respect. An assessment and an investigation, what's the difference? How did you come to the conclusion? You do evaluation of works, document. That's what an investigation.
Are you saying that there's a complaint on which the OSP was acting, or that the OSP had activated its investigative process? It did not. So let's not go there. It did not activate and has not activated its investigative process. Something.
No,
let's stick to what has been done. Let's not try to bring an interpretation that does not exist as far as this matter is concerned.
The OSP, please. The OSP uses words, assessment and analysis of risk.
Exactly.
And I'm submitting to you that assessment is an investigative process. How do you say
an investigative process for prosecution? Is that what you're saying?
That is what the Act empowers you to do.
Okay. So the OSP. Hold on. You are saying that the OSP is doing investigation, using its powers, its investigative powers, which is not. Let's state that for a fact. That is not what it did. But if you said the OSP...
You cannot call what you are saying as a fact.
No. The OSP did not do that. The OSP has not done a prosecutorial investigations. Let's not do that. You see, many entities... No, hold on. Eduji, hold on.
Nothing called...
Hold on. No, hold on. You know that risk assessments are done. KPMG... insurance companies, they do risk assessments. That is not an investigative process for prosecution. So you do the risk assessment and you submit a report on the risk assessment. And if there are things that need to be rectified or so on, they are done. So we know this, and we know this to be completely different from a process for the purposes of criminal prosecution. So do you think if he was doing a process for criminal prosecution, who has been cautioned, he would be saying that people are declined to give him information? He would have subpoenaed the processes. He would have forced the information he needs. That's not what he's doing. So let's not go there and have an argument. Let's not have an argument.
You want me to respond?
Eduji.
Let it not be stated that what the special prosecutor did was not an investigation. It is.
The special prosecutor, you are saying that the special prosecutor does investigations, indicts people, and then submits recommendation. Is that what you are saying? Is that what is done in criminal law?
Something. If you want me to respond to you, I will.
Okay, don't respond. And I want that to remain a fact. I don't want my audience to be misled. The special prosecutor has not done a work for the purposes of prosecuting in this circumstance. The special prosecutor has done an assessment, risk assessment, and it is required to give a report on the risk assessment. That's what it has done. All right, so now I'll come back to the studio. We have taken your preliminary views.
No, just 1 minute. You see, you don't make a point. You don't accuse me of misleading your audience and say it's okay. Please.
The document we are looking at, the title of the document is this.
You need to treat me well.
No, I'm treating you very fairly. The document we are dealing with is report on the analysis of the risk of corruption and anti-corruption risk assessment. If we will not have a discussion, I'm sure we cannot have you. We must have a discussion. That's what we are set out to do.
Yeah, I agree with you.
You cannot create your own facts and begin a discussion on it. I'm sorry. The report we are looking at is report on the analysis of the risk of corruption and anti-corruption risk assessment of the processes leading up to the request for approval and approval of the transaction agreement and tax exemptions granted by the Parliament thereunder in relation to the gold royalties monetization transaction under the Minerals Income Investment Act 2018, Act 978, and other related matters by Martin ABK Amidu, Special Prosecutor, Office of the Special Prosecution. And Martin Amidu begins the whole process by telling us that it is the power given him by law to do an assessment. He's not saying he's cautioning anybody or he's taking statements for the purposes of prosecution. So let our audience be clear about that before we start. I'm sorry it had to commence this way.
You are not simply listening to me. I indicated to you, Samson, and to your audience, that the special prosecutor need not submit any report to the president. What I said is that having come to the conclusion that they were bid rigging, and this is definitely based on a fact, what you do is to trigger your power to prosecute, proceed with that, because the act firms even suspicion to be the basis.
What the special prosecutor did, Eduji Tamaklo, is activating its power under the law, under the mandate for the purposes of the prevention of corruption. What it did is not for the purposes of prosecution of corruption. The special prosecutor has been given a special power and a mandate for prevention of corruption. And if you refer to Section 2C, Section 4, 29, 69, and 73 of the Office of Special Prosecutor Act 2017 and Regulation 31, that will be very clear. Please, that's what we need to let our audience know. The special prosecutor is not doing a prosecution on this matter yet. Right. So let's stay in the studio here. I'm sorry. Can we take Eduji's interference out? Right. Okay. So we want to deal with the substance of what the special prosecutor has done and interrogate whether or not he has a basis for some of the things he has done. So, among other things, he says the transaction is opaque. Mm-hmm. Transaction is opaque. He says there's manipulation of the bidding process. Mm-hmm. He says there's reasonable suspicion of corruption in the process. He says that data bank is a decoy, having been used through Imara as surrogates for the purposes of the bid rigging, and that this process was ill-fated, says all other things that clearly shows that the processes were bad and tainted with corruption. What do you say?
Yes, and I also think that you are right in trying to clarify that when you do a corruption risk analysis or for the purpose of prevention of corruption, you must send it to the principal who has the capacity to do something about it. And because executive authority vests in the president, if I see that you're about to do a transaction and I say, well, given all the concern about it, I want to preemptively analyze if there will be a scope for corruption if you went ahead.
Right.
And I finish that report, I must send you someone who has capacity to be advised about the risk. So I think there, I slightly disagree with Mr. Eduji when he says that the report shouldn't have gone to the president, because I think the president is the one who is entrusted with authority to actually prevent the corruption from happening.
His point is that the prosecutor should be prosecuted rather than...
That's a separate point.
Right.
That point is already made by Mr. Amidu himself when he says that he could potentially launch investigations for already committed corruption.
Right.
So there are two different matters we are dealing with here.
So he actually speaks about his words, future investigations for the suspected commission of corruption and corruption-related offenses.
That is corruption that has already potentially happened.
Right.
Or with the matters that are already in purview.
That's right.
But he was more concerned with advising the president, don't go ahead with the listing.
Because that's the job that he has been set up, he has been asked to do.
Well, no, he had taken it on his own accord.
Right.
Yeah.
But he's saying that we want to go and list something on the stock exchange. If you went through with it, I think that corruption is inevitable.
Right.
So don't go ahead.
Okay.
That is different from saying that up to now, are there things that have happened which constitute corruption and which you could prosecute? And he says, I might. I'm still working on this, but I might. And you're also absolutely right when you say that if he had determined from the outset that corruption had already been committed, he would have activated powers of subpoena, forcing people to subject themselves to potential perjury, and all of those types of things that criminal investigators are equipped with the law to determine. Now, back to your main question.
Right.
Does the special prosecutor have foundation for the claims that he makes and the findings that he's presented in respect of the conflict of interest dimension, the self-dealing dimension, the bid rigging dimension, etc., etc.? And the facts are emphatic about that. He does have foundation. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
And a lot of people are not aware of the chronology of these matters, which I think is very important and people understand, because it appears complex. Not complex, it's elaborate. There's a lot of moving parts and people don't have time. It starts with sometime between July and October 2017. A number of companies writing to the government that you have all these gold income that is spread out too far out. But you need money now to do important things. Why don't you come to us and we'll give you money? And when you get that money, you can invest it in wherever it is that you want to invest it in. And then because we are happy to take the risk of future returns, because it can go up or down, we are happy for that volatility. We will risk some capital upfront to get that volatility. You understand the point? So of those companies, there were 6 companies, one of whom sent 2 unsolicited proposals called Triple Flag. The other companies are mostly gold royalty companies. And they have said, look, that's the job we do. We come to you and say, in the future, you will get some income. Because that income can fluctuate, there's a risk. And if I'm in the financial space, risk is what leads to reward. You cannot get reward without risk. It's the fundamental law of finance. So for that reason, we can take that risk for potential reward and give you the money now. The government then looked at all of these matters and wrote on 6 October to the Public Procurement Authority that we want to take advantage of a potential receivables-backed transaction. It simply means this. Receivables is money you will get in the future. And if I can take that money that I can get in the future as a basis to get money now, I benefit from the ability to make investments today, which may generate more than what I will get in the future. The Public Procurement Authority then had a back and forth with the government on this matter. Remember, at this time, we are still talking about the receivables-backed transaction. So it's no different from the kind of receivables arrangements we do in Cocoa Board and etc., where we are always banking on future income. Then what happened is that in November 2017, a month thereafter, the government started to alter what it wanted to do. And it claimed that it now had a strategy of getting a transactional advisor independent of the people with the money.
Right.
So now he wanted permission, the government wanted permission, I'm not talking about the finance ministry, to go get financial advisors, financial counterparties who will give it money, but he also wanted to get a transactional advisor to advise it properly.
Right.
So now he wanted to do 2 streams of procurement. Here is where it gets interesting. Here's where it gets interesting because by the time that approval was given for the government to do what it has set out to do, it then radically began to change the mandate that had been given by the PPA. It is at this point that the government determined, and here is not where it is not entirely clear, that it's going to start building a gold royalty company itself. That transition, I don't think it was apparent to the special prosecutor because he does not address it clearly. But it was a major transition that to me is the source of all this confusion we have. Civil society has repeatedly said, when it comes to royalty transactions, it's not different from all the other securitization arrangements we have. We have some money in the future, we want to get some now. The difference is that at some point after the PP had given it authority, The government then decided that it did two things, one of which the special prosecutor comments with some great degree of concern and reservation when he says that one, it had been given approval, I then went and modified that approval to tell the people that want to come in that if you want to come in, you need a local partner, which is not something that they disclosed that they wanted to do the PPA.
Right.
Secondly, it now also decided that some of the people that had expressed unsolicited proposals, which it had gone to the PPA supposedly to go and put on a restricted tendering, they were no longer necessary. And he had introduced a mechanism that enabled it to reach out to new potential advisors. But we are still talking of one side of the transaction, the advisors. We've now stopped talking about the people that were going to give money to the government. Remember that. So those four companies that particularly were interested, your Navara, your Petrodel, your Triple Flag, all of a sudden they vanished from the discussion. After the one side of one leg of the procurement had been done, they now choose Imara, which obviously had Databank as its local partner. And Morgan Stanley and Boulders lose out. It's very important that we bear in mind that the special prosecutor says that he has no basis, given the documents they were willing to give him, to establish that this Databank Imara consortium won fairly. There's no evidence the government is willing to provide to show that. Once they now have this transaction, here is where it gets interesting. Imara then from the Databank, because they gave a very short period of time for responses. They sent RFPs out to about 8 companies, the best companies in the world: Citibank, Rothschilds, JP Morgan, etc., etc. From our investigations, almost 4 of the major companies they claim they sent the RFP to say they never saw anything. So I have reached out to a number of them, Barclays, a number of them, that have said that nothing came in. But somehow, 22nd December to 8th January, companies were supposed to present detailed proposal in a very fairly large transaction. So somewhere around 8th January 2018, we had a deadline. And they decided then that Imara and Databank had won. Good. They then signed an agreement, because first of all, there had to be an evaluation report, which on 29th April 2018, the ministry and everybody accepted that this is the evaluation report, everything is fine. Then they signed an agreement then in June of 2018 with Imara and Databank, where the special prosecutor starts to raise really damning concerns, etc. I'm not going to focus on that for another reason, because I want people to understand it's a very important point. In August of 2018, Imara now begins to hire advisors again for the government, suggesting that Imara's contribution, if you look at the sequence of activities, Imara's contribution was 0. It's not clear what it has expertise in, because he goes to SRK, come and do the technical report on gold for us. Then he goes to Buchanan, come and do this for us. Then he goes to White & Case in London. In fact, he hired 2 lawyers, which is understandable. One international law or British law, because you want to do things in the UK. Then he hires a local law, very respected law firm, Bella, to advise on Ghanaian law. But then he hires a 3rd law firm, African Legal Associates, which my good friend Gabi has now become wrapped in this control because of that. It's not entirely clear what is it that Bella could not produce, what is it that White & Case could not produce, for which reason only African Legal Associates had the expertise to add value. But what was Imara's real role? It appears as if the government's argument is that we don't know how to hire lawyers in London. If we want to hire a law firm in London to advise us on UK or international law, we ourselves, we are not sophisticated enough. We need some group in Southern Africa, because they had 2 Imara companies doing this, one in South Africa, one in Botswana. They have some expertise that they will use to go and hire a law firm for us. That is the argument the government is making.
Right.
They make all these hiring decisions. And then it turns out it's only when people start to apply to Imara that the decision that we want to build a gold royalty company ourselves has been made. Because now they say, oh, I'm conferring. I've applied to you, Imara. I want to do this transaction, help you hire a CEO for a government gold royalty company, Agyapa. When was it determined that this royalty company had to be formed? Who did they speak to at the PPA? Explain that this is the nature of the transaction we wanted to conduct, for which reason we wanted to hire Imara. It's not clear. So we have seen now a major shift from a government saying that we want to engage a royalties company to give us money for future receivables, to a government all of a sudden determining that it has to build its own gold royalty company.
But the transaction advisors were procured to do things in 4 phases.
Yes, up to completion phase.
The first phase is evaluation and recommendation phase. Then they had the documentation and preparation phase. Then they had the execution phase, which Martin Amidu says we have completed up to the third phase.
But that is where even Martin Amidu is not entirely well briefed.
The last one is the further advice phase.
So the question is, what are they advising about? Were they advising about the royalty streaming agreement with Triple Flag and the Mavra and the rest of them to choose one of them? Or their mandate had now evolved such that they wanted to build Ghana a gold royalty company, isolate Ghana's resource away from us and put it in London? Who gave them that mandate and when did it evolve? That mandate is not evident in the PPA arrangement for which they secured approval. That's the point I'm making to you. So the starting point is that someone had an agenda.
The starting point is the mandate agreement.
Yes.
Which engages Martin Amidu throughout this process.
Indeed.
And which Martin Amidu comes to the point of a certain illegality. Because the mandate agreement had mandated the Ministry of Finance to do a number of things. And it appeared to have checked those or had, giving those to the transaction advisor.
His central concern is this. If anybody at all in this country can go to PPA, that I want to hire someone to roast plantain for me, give me that permission to go and hire that person. And the reason we go and do restricted tendering is that these are the only people who can roast plantain in Ghana, or these are I'm in such a hurry that if I don't get these people quickly, my roasted plantain will be useless.
Right.
Then they give you that, okay, yeah, go and hire this person to do roast plantain. At that point, there's a mandate. There's a reason why you went to them to tell them that it's roasted plantain, because that's how they will do their evaluation. Whether or not it's actually the restricted tendering is actually reasonable.
Okay.
Whether or not this entity that you are hiring can roast plantain. The problem that Martin Amidu has is that now you go and get this company to roast plantain. Say, okay, now you know what? I actually want to buy a lot of fresh plantain. So I want you to go and hire people that can get me fresh plantain. And I want you to go and buy people that can get me charcoal. And Martin Amidu is saying that if we allow that kind of attitude, the procurement law in this country will be useless. Because everybody will go there and hire some middleman and let the middleman go and do all manner of procurement and claim that those other subsequent procurement activities are not subject to the Ghanaian procurement law. The argument that Imare's role was purely advisory, and because Imare's role was purely advisory, I don't have to take it to Parliament. But then Imara then subsequently goes on and makes a number of hirings which are fundamental to our preservation of our gold resources. And then you say now that, okay, well, then it is subcontracting. So we are no longer involved. So we don't have to subject it to Ghanaian procurement law. Meanwhile, the bills and invoices come to you. His argument is that it's a convention. It's specifically designed to circumvent Ghanaian procurement law. It's a specific strategy so that you don't subject these contracts to Ghanaian procurement law and to Parliament. And he's absolutely right.
Okay. But I just want to build this price point. You see, because the special prosecutor